If you're planning to retire from the OPERS and then return to work, you need to understand the rules before you accept that next position. In most cases, you may be able to keep receiving your pension while working, but there are timing rules. You need to have your notice requirements in the OPERS, and there could be some healthcare issues. And there's one important rule that can surprise retirees. So, if you're an Ohio public employee getting close to retirement, this video is for you. Hi, Todd Garneau here with Three Creeks Capital. Today's video is part of our Ohio Pension Playbook series. Our firm specializes in financial planning for Ohio public employees, so OPERS, STRS, and OPNF members. I worked for the Ohio Public Pension Systems for 7 years, so I have a unique understanding as we help you through the planning process. Today's video is going to talk about OPERS and being a reemployed retiree and making sure that you follow the rules and giving you some things to think about and how we advise clients. So I have a slide here to give you a sense in your situation. If you're retiring and then you decide to rehire, I want you to ask yourself these three questions. First is, are you going back to an OPERS-covered employer? If the answer is no, in most situations, you have nothing to worry about. So you can retire on, let's say, July 1st is your retirement date. Maybe you stopped work in June 30th. And then you retire July 1st, you could go back and start working in the private sector July 2nd. I'll talk about some things you want to think about there, but technically you can go back to work the next day in the private sector. Now, as my chart suggests, are you going to an OPERS cover position or even an Ohio public position? And if the answer is yes, then you want to get to question 2, and that is it in the first 2 months of your retirement? We have to remember with retirement, you may stop middle of the month, but your retirement date is always the first of the month following your last day of paid service. So just keep that in mind. I'll repeat that. First of the month following your last day of paid service. So my example, if I go out June 15th, my retirement date is July 1st. So I need to stay out all of July and all of August, then I can return to public employment in September without forfeiting those 2 checks. So again, a lot of times we hear when people come in here, hey, I heard I can go back to work after 60 days. They continually say 60 days, and the rule is 2 months. That could be more or less than 60 days. So 2 months from the date of your retirement date, not the day you stopped working. 2 different things, so keep that in mind. So let's say it's outside of the 2 months. Great, go back to work, no problem. You don't forfeit any checks, you continue doing your thing. But if it's within those 2 months, what you want to think about is your employer is going to be required to send in an SR6 notice. You can do this at the time of retirement on your application. Let them know, hey, I'm going back to work. Or your employer is going to notify them that, hey, we have contributions that we're going to be sending in on this OPERS retiree so that they can stop your retirement check for that month. I always tell people notify OPERS first so that you don't get paid the money and then have to send it back. So this is really, really important, okay? So what's the big timing rule? We know that it's 2 calendar months and not 60 days, okay? Very, very important. On the next slide here, I want to give you some things to think about. So what happens if you return within the first 2 months? Okay, not a big deal. You can go back to work the next day in the private sector and the public sector. You have to know, though, if you go back in the public sector, you're going to forfeit those 2 retirement checks. Again, not a problem if you know that. Hey, I have people that are reemployed the next day. They have 1 day of separation, which is really important. You need 1 business day of separation. Go back to work the next day. They start getting paid. They forfeit those 2 checks, and then 2 months later, they start getting their OPERS and their full salary. Again, not a problem, okay? So remember, when you retire, rehire, you need 1 business day of separation. So that's really important. Now, you can see here in this second part, the reason why I have it in red is you waive the pay or volunteer. So again, you think about, hey, I'm going to go help my employer out. I'm just going to volunteer. I'm not actually going to get paid. I tell them, no, I don't want to do, or I'll do that, but I don't want to get paid. Your 2-month window still applies. So you want to be careful not to go back to that public employer or any public employment that may be construed as volunteer work or even potentially paid position that you just waived for now so you can keep your retirement check. If OPERS catches up with you, there's a chance you'll forfeit those checks. So the issue isn't that you're making money, it's that that position that you're doing is a position that would normally be covered by the Ohio public pensions. Okay, so keep that in mind. This also applies to independent contractor work. So as you can see here, if you're an independent contractor, hey, I'm getting a 1099, I'm not actually working at OSU, but that position would normally be an OSU position or state of Ohio position or whatever it may be. You can still be impacted by that 2-month reemployment rule. So these are really important things because everybody thinks they can try and get around this 2-month rule, and ultimately OPERS and the public pension systems will catch up to you. So your employer forgets to submit the SR6 form. Again, this is something that you could easily say, well, that's my employer's fault. Again, ultimately, you've got to make the call. Call them, email them, whatever it may be, let them know you're going back to reemployment. They'll stop that check and then eventually start it back up after you get through that 2-month window. So really important there. Most people don't know about the SR6 notice. Here's the big issue that I find that people don't realize is that when you go back to work, that position, if it were a position that would normally have health care, you are not allowed to pick up health care at the public pension systems. What you're required to do is pick up health care through that employer, even as a reemployed retiree. Okay? So that's really important to keep in mind because if that position in any other normal circumstance would have had health care coverage, just because you're a reemployed retiree, you're not offered health care, PERS, STRS, any of the public pension systems are going to say, no, you cannot pick up our health care because that position would normally have been a position that has offered health care. You must pick up health care with that employer. So keep this in mind. It's really, really important. Bottom line, timing, paperwork, obviously healthcare is a big issue. One of the things that I would recommend is go ahead and take a look on OPERS' website. You can just type in their search field, the Benefit Recipient Handbook. It looks like this. Scroll down to page 27, and there's about 2 pages worth of information related to reemployment so that at least you understand the rules, you know how to fill out the application, and can make good financial decisions for yourself. So the key takeaway here is retire, rehire isn't as simple as, hey, I'm going to double dip and get my pension and go back to work and get this great salary. It's more about how do you do those things in the right way, play by the rules so that you don't impact yourself in a negative way. Even if you forfeit those 2 checks, just keep in mind it's okay, but as long as you know that and you're going through all the reporting methods to make sure that the public pension system knows that you're going back to work, it's totally fine. If you have more questions, feel free to click the link in the video and schedule an intro call. We'd be happy to walk you through this. And again, if you're becoming reemployed and taken into consideration various OPERS healthcare issues, go ahead and watch the next video that you see here. It'll help explain what you need to think about as you're applying for retirement and healthcare. Thank you.